On. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Dandelion Reflections. And today we have a special guest, Colleen, who's with us today.
Yes, welcome everyone. I'm so excited to introduce you to Remco Wijnhorst. He's a friend, he's a wonderful person, he's a dandelion. He has a very inspiring path, that's all I can say. And we met actually about a year ago during a book project that we were both involved in. And because his story was so compelling, and he actually reached out to me to offer some help and support, yes, building bridges of hope. um, we've been in touch ever since, and I've learned so much from our exchanges, and I hope you do too, and I'm sure you will, from this podcast. He has incredible life lessons, and he's simply a wonderful human being, and I wish there were more Remcos in this world, just like I wish there were more Chris's in this world. You're both like the parenthesis, like in my screen right now. So I'm right in the middle, sandwiched between you two. So it feels so comforting for me. So, yeah. So, Remco, welcome. And we want to hear more from you today, from your wisdom. What do you want to share with the world? And how can we go through tough times, basically? And how can we make the best out of the difficult times? And how can we stay grounded?
And thank you for your kind words, Caroline. That's quite the introduction. Um, it's going to be hard to live up to those lofty words. Um, what we know is that um, the lived experience that I've shared is quite extreme, and there is once you digest the first shock of it, there's a lot to learn from it if you allow yourself. And that is what we'll be talking about today, I think.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So let me just put my claws into this sentence that you and hold it for a moment. Uh, so whatever happens, happens, right? I think we all agree on that. And then many times it happens that, oh, this outcome I didn't really hope for, or this outcome I didn't see coming. And so what can we do? And as you said, okay, we can just use it and do the best out of it. And I love that. And this is exactly what our whole today's topic, today's talk with you, Remco, and our whole podcast is about being resilient because this is what resilience is about. Not, laying ourselves down to die when something happens, but instead stand up again and okay, I can fix this. This is just something that will pass. Wonderful.
Or even if it's not fixable, I can try and find a way to live with this.
Yes.
A lot of things like what is happening is um, everyone in this life experiences difficult situations, trauma, or just major challenges. There's no escaping that once you participate in life, and you have no choice. The question is, how are you going to go about that, and how do you come out on the other end? And if you have a level of curiosity about life and a level of acceptance, it makes it a little bit easier to deal with these difficult times. And there is I have found there is a lot to learn from that, and there is a lot of wisdom that comes out of all this adversity that you're experiencing that you can actually use and apply in your life going forward. And that is kind of the growth that can come out of trauma. But it's a lot of work and it's not easy to do, that's for sure.
Yes, Remco, would you like to give as an example the group you created, in fact, to help people access that resilience and transform adversity?
Right. Um, Maybe it's good to go one step back before that
Sure.
and share a little bit about my own experience
Yes.
because that leads into what I'm trying to do with that experience. Um, I am a rejected father of 8 years, long period of time. I divorced in 2015, and on the day that I left the house, after another fight that got really big, and there's a lot of voice raising, and it's just a lot of turbulence. Then I decided this is no good for anybody. This doesn't work. It's better for me to remove myself from this situation. It's better for everyone, actually. And then everybody has a time to reflect and calm down. And then next week or whatever time in the future, we're going to try and work through all this and with some calmer mindsets. Um, at that time, my I have one child, my daughter. She was in the house and she had decided to lock herself in her room to be away from all the turbulence. And when I left the house, I decided not to go knock on her door, try her, to convince her to open the door and say that I was leaving and whatever. I thought, you know what, I'll see her next week. Then we have an opportunity to sit down and talk calmly and go over a couple of things and just to comfort her and give her a little bit of a roadmap, if you like, or an expectation on how things are going to be going forward. Um, Now that was actually a fairly big mistake on my part because it turns out that's not how this process works. Um, and in the end, I'll skip a big part of the story, but the end result was that I have never seen my daughter again. I've spent 2 hours with her 3 years later in a counselor's office, and that is the extent of the contact that we've had. Um, and so no emails, no phone calls, no text messages, no nothing, absolutely nothing. Um, and that is very, very hard on a parent, let me tell you. When your child utterly, completely refuses you, um, that breaks your heart. Um, and then about, I can't remember, 5 years later, so 2020, out of the blue, I got a message from her mother that she had fallen really ill and was being rushed to a children's hospital in Vancouver, um, that is specialized in cancer treatments with a suspected uh, cancer. And a couple days later, we then had a final diagnosis that yes, she was very, very sick. That kicked off a process of 3 years of treatments and remissions and all that. And the end result, unfortunately, was that she passed away in December 2023. And the incredible hard part is that I've never been able to still see her. I was not part of her sick period. I got a tiny bit of information from her oncologist from time to time, but they were not allowed to really tell me anything beyond any general information. So those were really um, difficult and sad conversations. Um, and so even on her deathbed, I was still refused any contact. So I've not been able to say our goodbyes. Um, and to really illustrate how extreme the situation was, um, I did not even get the opportunity to say my goodbyes and visit her remains at the funeral home. that opportunity was even denied. And so I have not been able to say goodbye to my daughter. I've lost my daughter, and I've lost her 8 years ago. Um, Now it's all final since 2023. So you start a whole new level of grieving. Um, and that led me to feel a very strong desire to help, try and help. I'm not saying that I'm helping, but I'm trying to help other people that are living similar experiences that are so extreme that what I found is if you're trying to explain this to other people, you're telling the unbelievable story. It's literally unbelievable for people. It's so um, difficult to comprehend, to even process that exists in the world, um, that I find you have to try and find someone that understands um, the intricacies of that process inside out, and that can only come, and that's my opinion. I'm not saying that is a universal truth, but in my opinion, that only comes from a lived experience. Um, and Therefore, I decided to start a platform that allows and helps other people living through these experiences, and that is, parents, but also, we can't forget that part, grandparents, and the children themselves that are being put in a horrible, horrible situation, and that, have their own unique challenge and unique stories. Um, so what I do is I organize group sessions where we try and pick out a topic with the group that, we can make a list of 5, 6 topics easily, usually, that people would like to talk about together. And we try and do little group sessions. Groups are small, 6 to 10 maximum. So everybody gets an opportunity to contribute. So we do group sessions. And I've also created a buddy system for people that are going through this experience, where you have an opportunity to connect with someone as a buddy who is maybe a little bit farther along in the process, maybe still living that experience, or may have kind of closed that off and be at the end of the tunnel, and is willing to walk hand in hand with someone else to support them. Um, Personally, I find that buddy system the most valuable system. It's not really out there. It's hard to find support in these situations anyways, but a buddy system is sort of unique. Um, and while some people do better in a group setting because it's nice that you can, for lack of a better word, can hide a little bit in a group or take your time easing into the topic, maybe that's a better description, um, and contribute where you want while still the conversation goes on because other people are contributing. Um, but I find the most value and the most progress in people you see coming out of the buddy system, where it's one-on-one conversations, and there is there's magic in that. I can tell you that there is beautiful, beautiful stories that come out of that. So that is the long answer, Caroline, on your question. But then at least we've covered an introduction on where I come from as well.
No, this is perfect. I appreciate so much you sharing your story, Remco, and nobody else but you can say this story. And I'm so glad you followed your chronological order. And I want to thank the audience as well to sitting with us today, because this is how we help people who go through suffering, is bearing witness. So we bear witness to each other's suffering in this group. And and the audience does that. So I want to thank you for listening to Remco's story so far. And I had read his story a year ago when I received the book in the mail, because I had contributed to that book as well. And he had reached out to me, like I said, to meet and offer support. And I thought, well, I better read his chapter before I meet him. And when I read his story, which was about his daughter, Joy, and how he coped with that incredible, unbelievable story, like he said, I was crying. I was so moved. And I'm like, what am I going to tell this person? I was, I felt so, I'm humbled. And anyway, I have no words to describe that. This has been life changing for me to meet Remco and to have him as a buddy, because we are going through similar emotions, and a lot of his story resonates, with mine. So, thank you, Remco. It's again so refreshing and inspiring to hear what you have done with the unthinkable, because we don't think these things can happen, and unfortunately, they do. And the lived experience part of it is really important. So again, thank you for the generosity of your sharing.
I have decided that in order for something really good and strong to come forward out of this really difficult experience, I am willing to share freely of the story. Your response to that chapter in the book um, is not unique. I've had quite a few people reach out and give me feedback that they had the same experience, tears, very strong emotions, very um, very mixed, because very sad and at the same time in awe that
Mhm.
a person can still be upright and keep going and try and do something good with that. Um, what I really, really like about our book, as a side burst here for a second, is that it is such a mixed bundle of stories, from the very personal, where I would kind of put my story, all the way to a full-on scientific article that is explaining, uh, pathogenic parenting practices, um, and anything in between. It is a beautiful thing. I'm amazed in how that came out in the end. Um, what I try to do with the chapter that I provided is to illustrate what kind of extreme situations can develop in these situations, um, but also making the step to, but what can you do? What is still something you can do yourself with that experience? And that is how I arrived at the gift of time. And we won't go into that now, but the gift of time is a reflection, really, to um, shift your thinking towards your children, and to work on yourself and on your own situation for the sake of yourself, but also your children. There is a very beautiful story in there. Um, and that is my whole attitude towards this experience and this problem in the world. It really is a problem, and it's far more common than we allow ourselves to think, unfortunately. And over the years, it's come out that, yeah, there is a big problem here, and it's getting more and more attention, um, also controversial attention, unfortunately. But it's been what it has become my um, mission, if you like, to try and help other people living through this and educate the world about my lived experience as just one example that exists out there that is, like I said earlier, that is unbelievable. If I tell in detail the story that I have, it's literally unbelievable for others that have never seen this.
I have a question if I don't interrupt you, Caroline.
You're trying to be so gentle, Christopher. Oh my goodness, I have a question, but I don't want to interrupt the moment. Beautiful.
Um, you both mentioned how unbelievable this is. These stories are, and I know a little about both of your stories. And I actually I mentioned this to a friend, uh, and the friend's reaction was, "No, there's no court in the whole world that would allow this to happen." Yes,
That's a very common response, yes.
I was I was guessing that you would say that. Yes. So can you go a little a little deeper into the most common reactions from people actually seeing this? This can't be true. Yes, it is, because here's the
Yeah.
proof.
So what we need to do, but before we let's agree that we'll make that a short sideburst. First off, I don't
Yes,
like talking to about it in detail too much.
right.
Um, and I don't want to take away from our topic of resilience instead of going into all these issues. But what we're talking about is pathogenic parenting practices,
Hmm.
and a lot of people refer to it. It's a more commonly known term is parental alienation. I don't really like that labeling, but it is what people understand, so we'll go with that. Um, it it's very simple, the concept of it. The children need both their parents in their life, and that becomes complicated once there is a divorce in play. In a perfect world, both parents understand that need for a child, and they will work together to make it as good as they can for the children. That's in a perfect scenario. That's how it should be, in my opinion. Um, in all reality, what happens a lot in divorces is knowingly, unknowingly, intentional, non-intentional, the children become a pawn in a scheme to hurt the other ex-partner. And in popular terms, you can say in extremer cases, the children are being weaponized to hurt the other ex-partner. Now, that does tremendous damage to that ex-partner because that is, you're messing with nature, right? You're forcing a situation on people that is again goes against nature. Every parent loves their kids, and you're trying to block that and take that away. It's horrific on the parent, but how horrific that is nothing compared how horrific it must be for the children. Their mm, natural systems are being used. It's a survival mechanism. What happens? The parent that wants to alienate the children from the other ex-partner makes it into a situation where the child has no choice but to align with that parent for survival. The child is 100% reliant on that parent for their safety, for getting their needs in life met. And you force the child into a situation to deny the other parent. It's not what the children wants to do. It's absolutely unnatural. There is great research being done about that. One that I will put forward is uh, um, the work of Karen and Nick Woodall in London, UK. Um, they have just about a lifetime of experience with this and helping people through this. They have some really good books that explain the mechanism of these situations really well and what you still can do about it and what you cannot do about it. You have very little power as a rejected parent. There's very little you can do really. Um, so you would think, to come back to your question, that when you bring this in front of a court, the court will understand that, hey, this is not very nice. Um, we always say the courts need to act in the best interest of the child. Um, my unfortunate experience is that the courts have no idea what the best interest of the child actually is. That's the first problem. And that's understandable. Judges cannot know everything in the world. So they rely on experts in that regard. And the unfortunate part there is that there is very little experts on a world scale, actually. It's a very small group of people that really understands what's going on there and is able to articulate and explain how it works and what is happening and what can be done about it. Um, there is so many experts out there that have no clue what they're talking about. Absolutely are saying things that are opposite to the truth and opposite to what is helpful. Um, so it's a very difficult field. And I don't envy judges uh, that have to make decisions in these situations because it is very difficult and the stakes could not be higher. And so I advocate for anybody working in the judicial system, in the family courts, to get educated properly on this topic and to understand this the right way. Because the funny part is it's very hard to see the mechanism and what is going on. But once you see it, once the light comes on, you cannot unsee it. And it is so incredibly simple to spot. But you have to learn to see it. And that is the difficulty. Um, but anyway, to come back to your story, yes, um, you would think it is very easy and the courts can deal with this and it's just 50-50 parenting time and it just sorts itself out. Great. Yeah, it's not like that at all. And we're only even even since this is a known phenomena since the 80s, and here we are almost 50 years hence, and we're only starting to realize now that, ooh, this is really a big issue. And, the divorce rates have gone up like dramatically since the 70s and 80s. It was an anomaly back then. Now it's like commonplace. 50% of the marriages ends in divorce nowadays. Um, and so the issue becomes bigger and bigger, and we're starting to see what kind of bad stories are out there. So there is some momentum building where we can do some good and change the outcomes for children. But oh boy, there's a lot of work to do yet. But all of that, the whole thing about parental alienation, if you want to use that word, is that it is so incredibly counterintuitive. It feels the other way around. Like when you look at it with an uneducated mind, you're thinking, oh, wow, well, it's very clear cut. It's very simple. There's one abusive parent, and there is one parent that is doing everything right. And the counterintuitive part is how it presents that way at the surface. Once you start drilling down on what's going on, the story is actually the opposite. The parent that is looking like the Disneyland parent, the perfect parent, is actually the abusive parent.
Hmm.
But it is extremely hard to understand that.
Yes.
Anyway, big sidestep here. I my preference is more to talk about resilience and what you can do from that experience and general experience of trauma, because trauma
Mhm.
can take on many faces. But
So
that's the side story.
if you now if we catch the turn towards resilience, would you be able to somewhere in that along the way bake in the idea of how fathers and how mothers uh, cope and what's the word for resilient? Resiliate? Uh, how mothers and fathers cope with this in their ways. Uh, I could imagine that there's a lot of very deep uh, sitting uh, um, feelings um, that go on with there, and fathers and mothers, of course, they both suffer a lot. But I could imagine uh, in different ways. And now we have this wonderful situation that we have two, uh, both Caroline and Remco here, that know how it is to be on the receiving end of this. Uh, and how do you both go on with your resilience with this situation that you're individually in?
Mm, there's a couple things that happen. And first of all, the response from people that are experiencing trauma is always a big, wide spectrum that goes from one end, people able to digest what has happened and still move on and live a beautiful life, with that story being a chapter in their book, but not becoming the entire story. I think that's the most positive on the spectrum, if you like. The other end is very dark and is very sad, because I think the other end is suicidal thoughts or even actions, and anything in between. That is what people experience. Um, what I have learned, or what I think is important to recognize in this whole process, is it's a grieving process. When you lose connection with your children, it can feel as if your child has actually died on you. That's how deep those feelings and emotions run. And I've also learned one thing about grief: where there is really deep grief, there was very deep love. Those are two connected things. And can you think of a bigger love in life than the love for your child as a parent? There isn't much deeper in this world, I would say. So you can imagine how deep the grief will cut. And grief is a really, really funny thing. Um, it comes and goes. It can hit you at the weirdest times, in the weirdest ways. Our lives are full of triggers in everyday life that can trigger any thought, feeling, emotion at any time, in your dreams, at work, in the bus, in the grocery store. All of a sudden, you can be totally overwhelmed and unable to function, whatever that may look like. Um, that is my experience with it. And you were asking both of us, so I'll allow, I happily listen to Caroline's perspective on this.
Remco, I like so much to listen to you, and I feel like you articulate so well what I'm going through as well. And when you talk about grief, the problem with the phenomenon of being rejected as a parent is an ambiguous kind of grief, right? It's an ambiguous loss. So basically, we're grieving a child who has not died yet. In your case, you had both stages, both types of grief. Before the actual grief of your daughter, you had this ambiguous grief and
I call it a living loss,
a living loss. Very, yeah,
right?
that captures it very well. So, how do we put a foot in front of the other, right? Every day. And that's been my struggle. And when you mentioned the spectrum of responses, right? The trauma responses, they fall into the 4 F's category: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn
Freeze.
responses. And it's very normal. It's important to normalize those experiences, because this parent who's grieving might look like they're crazy. And it basically justifies the narrative that the other parent or the system has tried to use. And but it's a normal response to an abnormal situation. So it's important as a parent to that, and to not blame ourselves, and to actually have self-compassion, and then realize that we need to ground ourselves in order to be effective, to be healthy and resilient for our children. Because the way I shifted my narrative, my own responses, was to think about, hey, I better vibrate at a high frequency because it's going to help my kids ultimately. And that's called a physic and or quantum entanglement, right? It's a quantum physics. How we feel, what we do can affect others, even if they're not in our vicinity at the moment. So I'm like, how is that going to help my kids if I'm crawled into on the couch in a fetal position, feeling helpless? I mean, it's normal to go through that for a time, but then we realize it's not effective. So I'm thinking I need to live the best life that I can for them, for myself, and for them. And that's going to be role modeling for them. Ultimately, we don't want kids who then feel bad that their parents has suffered, right? So that would be an unfair burden on them. So I always have to keep that in mind, how it affects them too, because like you said, it's devastating for a parent to be ostracized and rejected. It's even worse for the child who is in that position, because it's counter-natural. It's against the biology. And yes, I appreciate like you recognizing that a lot of people go to the surface level and stay there, but we need to go deeper and deconstruct that this is not normal. Even abusive parents would not be rejected by their kids when there's no alienation. It's so biological to be connected to our parents that even kids who are abused aim for a connection. So when we see that there's no desired connection, and with no ambivalence between a child, from a child towards a parent with whom they had a previously healthy relationship, then it's a big red flag. So the parent needs to know, to really understand that this is kind of beyond them, and it doesn't say anything about their value or their worth as a parent, but there's a dynamic, like you said, a pathogenic parenting style, and it all comes from a place of deep wound. And that's something you talked to me about at some point, is the understanding and the compassion towards other people who are hurt doing these things. And that's an important step and shift to gain the resilience that we need to go through this. So anyway, I spoke in mostly general terms, but it's really about self-care and general balance, and to stay grounded, and doing that in small steps, because some days will appear too overwhelming. It's okay. It's just like, hey, what I need to do is just get my cup of coffee, look at the sunrise, comb my hair, restore some dignity. And this is out of love for ourselves, because it means it's out of love for our children as well.
Wonderful.
Yes,
Thank you
a
both.
100%. And we've talked about this before, and I think Christopher's gonna laugh when I bring it up. The make your bed in the morning story. And there's one thing I learned from my time in the army is that the first thing you do in the army when you get up in the morning, you make your bed. And it needs to be to a certain standard, and it's gonna get inspected. It needs to be perfect, right? That seems silly. That seems a little like over the top, like why? But when you think about it, it there's actually tremendous value in that ritual or in that gesture even, because your whole day from there on out can go sideways on you and it can be a total disaster. Nothing works, nothing goes well for you. But if you come back at the very end of the day, exhausted from your experience, nothing good on your mind, like you're just shaking your head, like, let me go to bed and try again tomorrow because this was the worst day ever. You come back to a bed that is made perfect, and you can actually smile and say, hey, one thing at least went well today. I have something that I did that went really well, that was in my control. And that gives you courage to try to take a rest and to try again tomorrow and see if you can create a better day. And so it's in these little things that you can find some solace, if you like.
I love that. Yes.
And to hook up with one of the things you said there too, Caroline, is that and that has taken me some time, and that has taken me a lot of effort, but I am able to express that I do have some level of empathy for my ex-partner in this whole experience as well, because I can recognize now that this is based on trauma that she has experienced in her life, and generations in her family before her, because it is an intergenerational kind of a trauma response, I think. um, and so I can recognize that she deserves help with that, and I'm just not able to be that person. But um, you cannot the experience that I've had, the way I can best describe it to another human person, human being, another person, is that was an evil experience. That is absolutely evil. That's the best word to use to describe it, where somebody else will get it. At the same time, that's not a helpful kind of a label. Um, and it would stand in the way a little bit of any level of empathy that you can have for the perpetrator of, you know, I would say a heinous crime, but it's not labeled as a crime in our justice system yet. So that is difficult to say. But I think it's clear what I mean. Um, I think finding a way to still have a little bit of empathy as well is helpful in your own journey, going forward, and in your own healing path. So I wanted to touch on that. But boy, is it hard. I'll tell you that.
It's a huge leap. And I was so impressed when you talked about that, and I think you mentioned that in your chapter as well. And I thought, I don't know if I'll be able to get to that point, and I feel like it's possible if we again do it in increments. If we try to understand, we start with little questions. Okay, why this? Why that? Where could that? Why could that be? That behavior, that attitude. That's it. And I think gradually the empathy develops, unfolds naturally. But if we focus on objectively, trying to be detached from the situation, and that means self-regulating our emotions first, then we can get to that point, maybe. So, yeah.
I think what happens a lot is that there is sort of a hateful response, that comes, and that is the easy way. It's very easy to do, to be angry and to be hateful, um, because you're feeling so powerless, you're feeling so hopeless, you're feeling so helpless. If you're able to step away from that just for a moment, you're allowed to go back there. You're not allowed to live there. You will find yourself in that spot from time to time because it's only natural. It's only, that just happens. That's how life is. But if you're able to allow yourself not to live in that space, but to remove yourself, walk away from it just for a while, like you said, in increments, and um, then you'll find different ways and different emotions, different ways to look at the situation and different emotions that come with that. And I find that those are way more healthy and way more enjoyable, and they start to open a pathway to still find new happiness in life and find renewed curiosity about life. Um, and you know, in my situation, I have a new family and I have three stepsons that are amazing and that I was part of their upbringing and have a role in their life to play. Um, I have I can't find the right words for that to describe, but I have an incredible new partner that shares her wisdom and worldviews and understanding of life, and shares her frustrations with life and her hurt and trauma. And um, there's lots of trauma to go around in our family to share, and yet we are a very healthy and happy family because we work on that, and we choose to be that way, regardless of all that has happened anyways. And when you're able to go live in that space, that doesn't mean, like I said, you'll still find yourself in this hateful and resentful and angry place from time to time. That happens, but you don't live there. You live in a different place. You live in a happy place. Once you are able to create that for yourself, your life will come back together. It can. It can be a good life again, even with in my case, with a tremendous hole in my heart. There's a piece missing there. There is no denying that. And yet, at the same time, I can still enjoy small things in life. I can still enjoy my family life. I can still enjoy everything in life. Yet there is that piece that is horrific, but it doesn't define me. I think that's the trick for resilience. If you wanna, we talked about it earlier. If you want to find a recipe for resilience, I think there it is.
Remco's recipe for resilience. Yes.
Yeah. So, where when you both think of a situation where you really thought you, well, the light is out, there's no light, and there's no end of the tunnel, but still you managed to somehow continue. So both of you have a huge amount of hope inside yourself, inside yourselves, that was there. Maybe you didn't see it, but it always was there, whether or not you accepted that fact. But how did it help you or not help you? Whoever wants to go first.
I want to leave some space for Caroline as well. I don't want to take the floor all the time, but I have some interesting thoughts around hope.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Go ahead, please.
Hope is incredibly important. It can be your lifeline. And because once you lose hope, you become hopeless. And that's not a good place to be, I think. Um, I have to be honest that in my experience, I've learned that hope is a double-edged sword. Hope is a lifeline, and hope can be an anchor dragging you to the bottom of the lake as well. Um, and what I mean by that is, at first, once I started to realize that I wasn't going to see my daughter anytime soon, and that things were deteriorating or had deteriorated tremendously already, once I started to have some proof of that, I felt it for a long time, but as the process of, court process and what have you, um, went on, I got actual proof in my hands where I could see, okay, yes, now it's factual for me. It's not a feeling or assumption anymore. Um, I still was hanging on to the hope that down the road we would be able to reconnect and rekindle the relationship. And a counselor I was talking to at the time was kind of trying to drive that home as well, like hold on to that hope. And after a while, after a number of years, I had another conversation with her. We weren't formally doing any counseling sessions, but we were in touch. And I said to her, you know what? I cannot hold on to that hope because that hope is actually what is destroying me right now. I'm hanging on for dear life that one day this will all come together, and that is all that I'm focused on. And what's going to happen if that doesn't come together? I'm going to be at the end of the road. I'm going to be sunk. So I decided I cannot live my life for that hope and just based on that hope alone. I sort of have to let go of that hope in order to keep going and to the point that we made earlier, to be healthy myself. The chapter in the book, The Gift of Time, basically says, what kind of a parent is your child going to find in you if they reconnect with you many years down the road? Are you consumed by alcohol and addiction, unwell, unhealthy? Are you, is your mental health, deteriorated to a point where you're merely existing and not really functioning? Or can you work on yourself so when they come back, there is a healthy parent that is waiting for them, that is able to help these children with their own experience? Because they've now learned that the other parent has bamboozled them in life. They can't turn there for their help. So who else can they turn to in life? Only the other parent. And if you're not well, you're unable to help your child at the place where they need you the most. So if you're able to find a way to work on yourself, to be ready, and it may never come, it may never happen. Your children may not reconnect with you in life. It's possible. Don't work on that premise. Work on the premise that it may happen one day. Just don't live on the hope that it will happen. Because if you allow yourself to live on that hope only and it doesn't happen, you're sunk. You have nothing to live for anymore because that's what you lived on. And that is the double-edged sword. It's a support system during difficult times, and it is a handicap. It's a hindrance in your personal development if that is all you focus on. If that makes sense.
Wow. What to add to this? This is beautiful. And I love the dialectical component of hope, how it's so nuanced, right? For me, hope, just to summarize, I think we have to be specific about it. It's like it's wearing different clothes. If we say someone is in a coma and they're about to die, like it's happening to one of my dear uncles right now, I know there's no hope for him to survive this. He has a brain tumor. But I have hope that his life is going to continue to inspire us because who he was. He was such a light in our lives. So I think I had to change my clothes that, yeah, he's going to live to be old. That was my hope as a kid. He's always been part of my life to, yeah, I don't have that hope. yet anymore. But the hope I have is that he's going to continue to live in us and inspire us. And with those situations like parental alienation, we can hope that we'll find a meaning. We can hope that this will expand our awareness to understand human condition. So that's another example of how I reframe the hope for myself, and not just having a vague, intangible, totally abstract hope that everything will be ideal. No, it's a bumpy road, right? But I think if it's grounded in reality, hope can be a tool to help us go through tough times. But we just need to remember it has to change clothes. It has to adapt to the weather. Sometimes it needs a
Yes.
really warm jacket.
I love that analogy. Very, very well said.
So we're closing in on an hour, and I do feel, and I'm sure we all agree, that we could expand this for many sessions, for many hours, and this is so important. But as Remco said, the focus on this episode and this interview is resilience. And for me personally, and a part of resilience is also what do I manifest into the future? So to round this up, I would like to ask both of you, what would you, is there a recipe? We have spoken of about recipes earlier. Is there a recipe for manifestation, a desired outcome into the future? Is there something that you have to tell our audience?
Go ahead, Caroline.
I would just say, I've been thinking about that a lot, obviously, over the past several years, but doing something that makes us feel alive every day, what puts you in a state of joy, what makes you feel alive, and do it with love. Do everything you can with love. To me, that's, I think, how I hope that I would manifest a desired outcome. This is how dreams can come true, is when we do things that make us come to life and that we do them with love.
Wonderful.
I really like the dream analogy because I think a lot of our work is done during our non-awake hours, so during our sleep. Um, and I have set intentions before I go to sleep sometimes where I almost like try and instruct my brain what to dream about that night. Let's work on this or let's work on that. And I find that, and I am no scientist in that regard, and I have no idea how it works, but I know that it works for me, is everything starts with a dream. If you can dream it, you can probably build it. You can probably create it. It takes a lot of work, and I've started businesses. I've started this support group, things like that. It all starts from a dream, really. And I used to be so busy years ago with a business and all these things that I would live on 4 hours of sleep for years on end. Um, and by choice, like that was absolute. I was living my dream life, but that short period of sleep, um, in that time, ideas would come to me, but I would have forgotten them in the morning when I wake up, and that became a problem. That was a frustration for me. And so what I did is I literally had a notebook and a pen next to my nightstand, and I would wake up with this brilliant idea at 2 in the morning, jot it down in 10 words. It was even mumbo jumbo sometimes, but as long as I can figure out to find back that thought in the morning, and that's how I would do it. So I think from experience that there's a lot of work gets done in our sleep. And so to make sure that your sleep hygiene is in order, I think is one of the easiest and one of the best things you can do for yourself to help yourself through situations. But that's a whole nother conversation, I think.
I was just thinking, thank you, Remco. This is the topic for another podcast, right, Christopher?
Right. Yes, it is.
Yeah, how to use dream
Wonderful.
life. Yes, love it.
Thank you so much, both of you. It was a
Thank you.
real joy, even if the topic is somewhat heavy and not so easy digestible. Um, but I think just listening to you guys helps a lot uh, for many people out there, and that's the whole thing. That's the thing of your the meaning for your groups, Remco, and your organization that helps other uh, parents in similar situations. And that's the idea of our podcast here, the Dandelion Reflections, to help others just how to have a little more hope and getting better through life. So we all thank you for having listened to this episode, and yes, thank you to Remco, and thank you, Caroline.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Remco, for holding the space together.
Thank
It
you
Yes.
very
was,
much. It was wonderful.
it was. Thank
And if any one of you would like to leave a comment or would share your thoughts about this topic or anything else, in fact, so welcome down in the comments, and we are very happy to read that. Okay, so goodbye to you all, and see you next time.
Be well, everyone. Thank you.